in Kenya, where President William Ruto has bowed to pressure and says he will no longer sign a controversial tax bill. This led to major protests across Kenya for several weeks now. At least 23 people were killed on Tuesday as demonstrations against the bill reached the Parliament of Kenya. In an address to the nation, the second in less than 24 hours, Ruto said it was clear that Kenyans want nothing to do with the bill. He has promised to open dialogue with young people who were the driving force of the protests to hear their grievances. Ruto also said corruption is a matter that he will tackle.
Listening keenly to the people of Kenya, who have said loudly that they want nothing to do with this Finance Bill 2024, I concede, and therefore I will not sign the 2024 Finance Bill, and it shall subsequently be withdrawn, and I have agreed with these members that that becomes our collective position.
Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Malcolm Webb, who's in Nairobi for us. A very different tone from the president than we heard on Tuesday evening, Malcolm. Ruto now rejecting and withdrawing his own finance bill. How is this being received by Kenyans?
Well, on social media, some of the protest organisers and many others have this has been met with a great deal of skepticism. Some say that, or many say that they'll still go to the streets on Thursday as planned. There's clearly still a great deal of mistrust. We just spoke to one of Kenya's leading lawyers who represents political opposition, who's explained that Ruto's speech that took place just an hour ago communicates his position on the bill, but constitutionally it doesn't amount to anything, and for the president to turn around this process, he would have to communicate with a memorandum to Parliament to officially reject the bill. People are waiting to see if that will actually happen, and if that doesn't happen, then the bill is automatically assented into law after 21 days. Now, these are some of the issues that a lot of people are talking about, because clearly among the protesters and the many people, the rapidly growing number of people who've been expressing their opposition to this bill, there is very little trust. One of the things that President Ruto spoke about in his speech was he defended the bill, he defended the proposed budget, but he said following this public outcry that it would have to be revised and that the government of Kenya would have to cut some of its services. He referred to the Constituency Development Fund, which the proposed bill was going to allocate money, tens of thousands of dollars, to each parliamentary constituency. This is something that people demonstrating on the streets, this particular fund, they expressed a great deal of skepticism about, saying that it amounts to unaccountable sums of cash which are given to MPs for them to spend how they please. And it's that sense that of mistrust and skepticism over what many people feel is widespread and increasingly visible corruption and misspending that's led to that reaction of many of the campaign organisers online since President Ruto spoke.
So mistrust, you say, and more protests had been planned for tomorrow, Thursday. The army had been deployed, but I understand that's now also been reversed. Will the protests still go ahead, and what can we expect the government to do, and how it might respond if the protests still go ahead on Thursday?
Well, we'll find out on Thursday if the protests go ahead, or how many people indeed they gather, how many people are drawn. That's what some organisers are still calling for. On the streets, one of the things that people have been chanting more than anything else is Ruto must go, again reflective of that deep mistrust among the protesters, but following the use of live fire against crowds, against unarmed protesters, in which several people were shot dead yesterday. We're waiting to see if, of course, that will deter some people from taking to the streets, and then also if what the president said just over an hour ago will make some of these demonstrators feel that their objective has been achieved for now, or if they either don't trust what the president says or have further demands that they want to express. We'll be waiting to see if that does indeed bring more people back to the streets.
Thank you, Malcolm, for the updates. That's Al Jazeera's Malcolm Webb live there in Nairobi. Let's take a step back and just remind you of how we got to this point in Kenya. The unrest marks one of the most severe challenges to the Kenyan government in decades. It was triggered, as you heard, by the finance bill that would have raised taxes on essential items such as bread, cooking oil, fuel, and sanitary products. A grassroots movement led by young Kenyans mobilized peacefully through social media. But after the finance bill was tabled on June 18, opposition intensified. President Ruto has faced mounting criticism for his handling of economic policies and taxation since he came to office in 2022. He became increasingly unpopular after his administration removed subsidies on food and fuel. Well, let's now speak to Stella Agara, who's an African governance and security analyst and a long-time tax reform campaigner. She's joining us from Nairobi. Stella, good to have you again with us on Al Jazeera. We heard a much more conciliatory tone from President Ruto than, when he spoke less than 24 hours ago. What is your reaction first to the speech and his decision, he says, to withdraw this finance bill?
I think being a peace and security practitioner, for me, this is a relief. It's an extreme relief that he came back. Of course, there are many other comments to the message that he came back with, but it's a relief that he's come back. It's a relief that he has gone back on some of the things that he had said in the speech yesterday, because that had left the citizens more enraged. I'm glad he came back. I'm glad he has refused to sign the bill to an act to assent to it, which of course leaves a bit of room for negotiation. One, to probably convince Gen Z about the possibility of cancelling the protests that are planned for Thursday, or negotiation to completely get rid of it and develop a new bill.
Yeah.
But at least it creates room for negotiation.
It creates room for negotiations, you say, Stella, but as we heard from Malcolm and from what I've been reading on social media, a lot of Kenyans do not trust what Ruto has just said and don't believe that this is actually the end of the story. So, and many of them, in fact, on social media now are saying that they will still go ahead and demonstrate on Thursday. So how do you bridge that gap? The lack of trust there seems to be between the president and this young generation that's taken to the streets.
Actually, majority of the reactions that I have seen has got to do with some of the language that he used. He's still referring to amendments when the Gen Z are actually talking about completely dropping this finance bill. When I say negotiation, I'm actually saying negotiation to convince him to drop it. I don't see why that conversation should still be going on, because the events of the last couple of days should have convinced him. But if he's sending it back, he's sending the bill back to the drawing board, then basically they're saying that he needs to be a little bit more considerate about this thing. I had mentioned in the previous interviews that we had earlier that the president had not realized the kind of problem he has in his hands. Part of the reason why you will see that he's even refused to assent to the bill, but they're still calling for protests, is because this thing graduated into another conversation about demanding that he leaves office, which is, of course, a whole new conversation that has come up as a result of the hard-handedness and the thorax with which everything was being implemented in the last couple of days.
You talk about negotiations, and he also talked about negotiations and having a conversation in his speech there. But who does he have that conversation with today? The fact is that this protest movement, these Gen Zs, as they're called, is a leaderless one. Is that an advantage or disadvantage, you think? I mean, in the past, we would have seen people like, Kalonzo Musyoka or Raila Odinga on the streets with the demonstrators, but that's not happened this time. This has been a very organic movement. So when Ruto talks about dialogue, who does he speak to?
I'm smiling because you are asking me this question that I'm supposed to respond to as a politician and also as an activist. As an activist, it's excellent thing that Gen Z's protests do not have a leader and there's nobody to call to negotiate with and maybe bribe them and cause them to drop the agenda that they are carrying. So as an activist, it's a perfect thing that these protests do not have a head. do not have a leader, does not even have a group of leaders, and so it's a bit hard to negotiate. So one of the things that the president may have to do, moving on from today, the good things that he has not accented to the bill. So one of the things he may have to do is to completely depart from that bill and have a conversation and more consultations about how finance bills are going to be developed in the future. Kenya can definitely survive without collecting the extra billions that they wanted to collect through this finance bill or the proposals in this finance bill. The other thing is that he can now start having a different conversation with Kenyans. Some of the Kenyans feel that even the speech today, though conciliatory, there are certain things that he needs to acknowledge a little bit more, especially the people who died, etc.
Right.
And so having a conversation with Kenyans about that, getting rid of some of the officers who have been very rude to Kenyans, maybe may start off a conversation. But I don't know. He has options of things he could do now. I know for a fact that he will not find anybody to negotiate with amongst the Gen Z, because
Right.
these protests were never convened by anybody.
That's quite interesting. Just to understand the source of the anger, I think we need to take a step back. It's not just about this finance bill, is it? I mean, we heard Ruto in his speech there talk about the significant progress in pulling Kenya from the brink of debt distress. He read a laundry list of areas where he thinks Kenya is doing well. But that is not, it seems, the opinion of the majority of Kenyans. Why has what President Ruto said there, why has that not trickled down to the common man in Kenya?
I think we need to first of all realize that President Ruto is running a very capitalist agenda. He's coming into office seeing the removal of some of the subsidies that had been put to buffer the citizen. These subsidies were there to buffer the citizen, especially from the price of essential commodities like fuel, which then normally impact the price of everything. When he removed that, when he started tinkering with important things like the feeding programs in schools, free education, etc., the burden was consistently being transferred from either a subsidy or as a government support program to the citizens. And of course, the pain would eventually be felt. Unfortunately, this transfer is something he was doing at a time when the country was just trying to recover from the recession that resulted from the pandemic. Number two is that when he came into power, he awakened a certain group of people who were unemployed youth, but were very disinterested in politics. He told them that they're hustlers, they need to be recognized, their voice needs to be heard, they need to get jobs, and any small job that they get counts. And he said that even if they engage in these jobs, their lives need to have a difference after some time of engaging in the jobs. Unfortunately, his term has been characterized by a period where most of these young people have not gotten jobs. The few jobs that young people had are being lost because of the industries that are being lost, and the investments that are leaving the country to go to our neighbors because of high taxes and poor business conditions and high cost of running business in Kenya. So basically, he has negotiated himself to this place. But then when he got to this place, unfortunately, he did not choose to speak to the youth in a manner that will then tell them, maybe we need to dream afresh. Instead, he came with arrogance, and his team was even more arrogant, which is what put him in all this trouble.
Stella, we're going to leave it there. It's so interesting to talk to you as always. Stella Agara joining us there from Nairobi. Thank you for your time.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.